do is I want you to focus on the top six. These are the top six. These 21 were listed in the order of the problems we have in them. So the first one is obsessed with winning. Now, all entrepreneurs have this. We have to have it. If you're not obsessed with winning, so you have to be balanced with that obsession. Second one, we say somebody tells us something, I already knew that. You got to be the smartest person in the room all the time. You say two words. Thank you. Thank you. That's all. Right? If you have questions on it, go ahead. If not, then you just move on. Take the idea and move on. Third one down, passive judgment, argues, disagrees with people all the time. Makes destructive comments behind other people's backs. Starts with no, but, or however. Those are called verbal erasers. Somebody says something, you go, no, 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 no. Use the word and instead of those words, no, 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 but, or however. Because it erases everything the other person has said, and people become irritated. So these are the top. Starts with that, or defend your position. Tells the world how smart we are all the time. Speaks with anger, emotionally volatile. Is negative. Let me tell you why that won't work. Right? Now, just look at the top 8. Tell the person next to you, turn them and tell them which one of those you're going to have to work on. Just one. Just pick one. I'm going to have to work on this one. Turn to the person next to you, tell them which one you got to work on. Go. All right. So just the intention to work on one of those things will help you to solve it in your relationships. Which one trips you up in relationships is important. Everything will change in the organizations you're trying to create. Everything will change. Your processes have to keep being innovated, upgraded, evolving. Everything evolves. The whole structure might change. But what will hold it together, the glue that holds the organization together? Relationship. Never take one lightly. So I'm going to demonstrate this. Could the 4 of you stand up before we leave? Perfect. Perfect. Everybody, your back is okay. Everything is strong. You're healthy. Yeah, you're healthy. Okay. So put everything down on the chair. If you have anything in your pockets, you can put it on the chair. If you have any money, I'll hold it.
I'd like to hold that, Jim. Jim, let me get the
Who
one.
wants to?
I'll take it.
Okay, come on up. Come on up.
No, I'll with you. I got this.
Come on up here. So you'll sit down and you face that way. With me, feet down. You'll sit down. That's good. You'll sit face that way. Now, they're in an organization right now, and they're in what we call an the organization together. Not the structure, not the processes, although we have to keep refining them and serving our customer better by improving them. But relationship is the key to organization. Relationship. When was your entrepreneurial seizure? Because we all had one. Here's what Mr. Berger says: the excitement of independence associated with getting rid of a boss. Isn't that great? Getting rid of a boss is almost always fueled by a flawed understanding of what being on your own and running a business is. That's why the BootCamp. You can ask all of us who've been in business, helping businesses for years. This is what I'm going through. Have you ever gone through that? And the answer will probably be yes. Yes. We've been through that. Here's what happened. Here's what went on. Here's my definition. An entrepreneur is someone who is allergic to bad bosses or bosses in general. You want to run your own business, right? And if you want to run your own business, you're going to have to relate to a lot of people. That's the topic this morning, relating to people. A lot of us are technically fantastic, but we have social skill lacks. We need to improve our social skills a little bit. This is the time to do it. I'll give you a recommendation. Join Postmasters, an international organization where you speak and relate to people every week, once a week, 1 hour a week. Postmasters. Join Postmasters. It'll help you build relationships and be able to speak in public, which you're going to have to be able to do. You're going to have to speak in public if you're going to run a company. Here's the definition of one of my friends, Fred Bratton. Fred Bratton started 2 companies. One went to $338 million per year, called Telephone. $338 million a year. Fred's definition of this thing called entrepreneurship is this. He said an entrepreneur is someone who will do anything to avoid getting a job. You don't want a job, you want a passion. And you want to be in control of that passion. You want to be able to really connect with your customer. You want to connect with vendors. You want to connect with people and share the passion that you have with them. You don't just want a job. There's Fred in my classroom at the university. There's Fred up close. Here's our next person I want you to meet, who's been on the road here in GIST. He is third from the left, Dr. Ciputra in Indonesia. As you notice, the furthest on the left is Miss Georgia. She represents more of the people here. And the next guy was the video. But that guy who follows that is a billionaire in Indonesia. He says an entrepreneur recognizes an opportunity, adds innovation, and takes a calculated risk in its execution. A billionaire, you might want to listen to him. At age 12, his father was killed in the war. I think he's around 80 years old now. And now he's built most of the product. Somebody you should know. Somebody you should go online, read about, get some of his thinking. He started an entrepreneurial university in Indonesia. Another picture of him. He said this: I realized that if the precious competency of entrepreneurship could lead me to such success, that competency should be shared for the betterment of the world. His idea was to turn dirt and scrap into gold, and that dirt and scrap were his construction materials. He's a builder, he's a developer. Look up Dr. Ciputra. Dr. Ciputra. who is kind of the father of management. He was born in Austria and became the guru of management. He said that she could run any organization in the world, that she was the best executive he'd ever seen. She started with a broken down Girl Scouts organization and turned it into an effective running organization which still runs today. It was going downhill and almost out of existence until she took over. So she made the Girl Scouts a worldwide success. I want you to again get up out of your seat, find somebody, tell them what you are going to do to change the world like Francis did. What is your idea? How will you change it? What are you going to do? You have 1 minute to tell that person. Ready? It's got to be a new person that you haven't met before. Ready? Go. Stand up. Go. Yes.
খোলা যায় এমন ভাবে লাগাতে পেরেছে। হ্যাঁ, আর্টিস্টটা খোলা যায় মানে পূর্বে যেটা আছে একটা উপরে একটা জায়গা আছে নাকি? জায়গা এমনি কেমনি লাগে? কেমনি লাগে?
Ladies and gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, and They sleep, they eat. So there's a bottom line in business and then there's a top line. What's the bottom line? Profit. The top line is relationship. It's not like it's going to be kept if you don't feed it. There are always exchanges. So over 15 or 16 years that I from Romania, we've had exchanges. We exchanged help, assistance, information, friendship, meals. I always have to pay. Oh, I'm sorry, we're in public. We share a lot over 16 years of friendship. He's going to get me back because he'll be presenting that later on. His is an extension of what I do on later on. What time? 11:30 or so. He'll be up here in front of you. While you're building these relationships, you want to accomplish some goals. And here's how easy it is. It's easier to innovate than to if we think we have to invent something brand new, we may never get to it. But everything needs to be improved. Everything. Anything. So it's easier to pick something, you know what, I can improve that. I've got a thought how to improve that. So innovate. It's easier to make things better than to make things up. Think about that as the next 2 days unfold. And I want you to think about people who have started with nothing and have accomplished the goal. I don't want you to have an obstacle in your mind. When you have it, erase it. So think about this. I want you to turn to the person next to you and tell them how much money it took for the average Fortune 500 company to begin its business. How much money did it take? Go. Turn to the person next to you. How much did it take? The average is $10,000 for a Fortune 500 company to begin. But look at some of these companies. $1,000 for EDS, which is now a multi-billion-dollar company. Body Shop, $6,000. Apple, $1,250. $1,250. DHL, they started with nothing. Publication company, zero. My friend Fred Gratson started in his bedroom with one telephone and no money. Brought it to $338 million. And believe me, he's lazy. He doesn't want to work. He's never had a job. Never. And he was totally successful. So there it is, $10,000. 33% of them started with less than 1,000. So all you need is your seed idea, your thought. Yes, you can go and raise no problem, but it's your seed idea in your mind and the relationships you build successful. Don't think you have to do anything alone. You will do it as a team. You will do it as a leader. Don't feel you're going to have to accomplish this whole task by yourself, on your own. Never. And as an example, I just published I got 60 people in the back of that book, and I thank them for helping me write that book. 60 people. 60. I want to wish you luck. I want to meet every one of you individually. I've met some of you already during these 2 days. And if you have any questions about anything, I'll do my best to answer it. And good luck to all of you in the next couple of days. Thank you for your attention. Looks like I can continue.
But here's a way. So I have coffee chits with me. So you gotta find me. When you need a coffee, just quietly walk at the back of the room and just get the chit from me. Okay? But you guys gotta ask questions. No? That's important. While they prepare, does anybody have any questions for us? Anything you need, any, I know you guys have been working on slides and all that, the work and stuff. You ready? Jim, you ready? Okay. You guys have any questions for us while we wait? Presentations, pitches? Have you guys been seeing the Twitter rolls? So people are posting, so I hope you guys are posting on Twitter rolls. I think people are asleep, so we might need to do a coffee break sometime in between if you guys are ready. All right? Okay. Up next, we have Jim. How many of you guys know Jim already? I thought you were supposed to know already. Jim was already. So Jim is going to be going over Lean Startup and a few other things, and I'll leave it up to you to give it away. Thank you.
Hi guys. Nice to be here in Bangladesh. I never would have thought I'd be standing here in Bangladesh talking to a bunch of young entrepreneurs like you had asked me 2 months ago. But I've come a long way to see you guys, and I'm very excited to hear about what you guys are doing to help you out. Okay, so what I'm going to talk about today is Lean Startup, customer development, and business model tools. How many of you have heard of the term Lean Startup before? Okay, good. Okay, more than half. Great. How about customer development? How many have heard of that term before? Okay. And then the business model canvas. All right, good. Great. Well, so I'm not quite as old as Jim Magnola, but I have been working in innovation entrepreneurship for about 25 years as well. And what I'm going to talk to you about and tell you about, I'm going to be very honest with you, is that for most of those 25 years, everything I did was wrong. It was not until about 3 years ago when I was presented with this Lean Startup approach that I realized, oh my God, I've been doing it wrong this whole time. So what I want to do, my life mission now is to try to share that message with young entrepreneurs coming up now so you don't make the same kinds of mistakes that I've made. That being said, I have successes under my belt, but I have many more failures. What the Lean Startup approach tries to do is to make sure that you reduce those failures, reduce that risk, and increase your successes and accelerate towards your goal more quickly than was possible before. Okay, it's not working. Maybe I can just advance it. Okay. So first of all, I'm going to talk about lean startup concepts. Now, you guys are all in the middle right now. You're all entrepreneurs. So you know that entrepreneurship is all about uncertainty. It's not like launching a new division or a new product from an existing organization because you just don't have any data to go off of. If you are part of an existing organization and you're trying to sell a new product line, you kind of can figure out what the future might look like if you change a few features here and there, what the new product line should look like. But when you're doing a startup, you just don't have that kind of data. So how do you get that data? What it's really tough to do. There's a lot of uncertainty. Second thing is that you don't have resources. If you're launching a product line from an existing organization, they can probably fund it. They're going to provide the people. There's existing customers, there's existing organization partners to help you. But with a startup, as you guys all know, that's not the case. So I was actually talking to one of you, exercises that Jim was with us, and he said, I really need a roadmap about what am I supposed to do next? And so that's what the lean startup provides. Is there another mic? This one seems to be fading in and out quite a bit. Okay, great. So, I told you earlier that I've been working in entrepreneurship for a long time. What I've got up there are sort of the old school ways of thinking about what I used to do, what most entrepreneurs have done until the lean startup approach came out. How many of you guys have business plans? Okay. You guys are probably going out there and talking to investors right now or trying to recruit people. The way that we've always thought about these steps is, you've got to plan first. It's all about execution on your plan. So we all went out and we wrote 20-page, 30-page business plans with extensive financials, etc. What I'm going to tell you today is that that's wrong. You don't want to do a business plan, except when you have to communicate and raise money. That's really the only time you need to create a business plan. Second thing, startups, right, are not, so startups are just small businesses. That's what a lot of us used to think. We have an org chart. How many people here are CEO of the company? And then you have a president of your company as well, and maybe a VP of sales, a VP of engineering, a VP of this, a VP of that. So that's kind of the old way of doing things. We figured, okay, well, this is how the big companies do it. This is how we should do it as well. Third thing, linear process. When you hear about the stories of entrepreneurs telling about how they were so successful, a lot of the times it sounds like, oh, I came up with a great idea, I raised a bunch of money, and I launched this great company, and it's all perfectly beautiful. But what we found in reality that that's almost never the case. Entrepreneurship is really messy, dirty, just doesn't happen when you think it's going to happen. It's not linear. It's definitely a process that is all over the place, and I'm sure you're learning that right now. Next thing there, how many people already have a product that they're selling? Okay. The idea of most inventors, innovators, entrepreneurs has always been, oh, I've got this great idea, I got to go build it. I'm going to raise a lot of money, build it, and then everybody will come. I don't know how popular that movie is, the Field of Dreams. Do people know that movie? Where they have, I think it's not that popular in this crowd, okay? But it's a very famous phrase in the United States, if you build it, they will come. I think probably if you've already got your product, you realize, well, I built it, where are all my customers? It doesn't always happen that way. In fact, it usually doesn't. Next thing there's the beta test. How many people are in beta test right now? Okay. So the beta test is the way we usually think about doing a software launch, right? You put out a beta, get feedback, and then you can go out with your real launch, right? In the lean startup approach, we don't take that approach at all. We do something that I'll talk about later called minimum viable product. Let me tell you about, I just told you, like, these are all the mistakes that I've made. And I think most entrepreneurs are still making these mistakes. So let's talk about what the new school thought is about what lean startup does. Here, we think about a business model first. What's the difference between a business model and a business plan? Anyone, we need startup experts out there in the crowd. What's the difference between a business model and a business plan? The idea is, yeah. Oh, you were waving at somebody? All right, so anybody want to tell me, anybody know? Sorry? Business model and change, right? So when you're writing a business plan, you are making this story up. You're just creating a fallacy about what the next 5 years is going to look like. That's BS, right? That's not going to happen. You know it. The investor knows it. What a business model is it shows what you think the world looks like at the moment that you are writing. So we're going to do a bunch of business models today where you're going to say, this is how I think the world looks like. And if the world looks like this, then my business model, my business will be successful. But you have to realize that that's not going to ever be static. That's going to change because we're going to be learning new things. Your customers are changing. The economy is changing. The environment is changing. So what we want to do is we want to build a business model campus, which I'll talk about later, which is something that's fluid. It's very easy to understand. It's just a one-pager, and you don't want to waste a lot of time writing things out in fiction that lasts, you think is going to say, will last for 5 years. That business model only maybe lasts 1 day before you learn something better and you make your business model better. Second, startups, you have to stop thinking about startups as smaller versions of large companies. In fact, startups are really just temporary search organizations. If you're trying to build your startup from day one, sales, you're in trouble. Because you don't need all those people at the beginning. When you've got a startup, all you're doing is creating a temporary group to try to make sure that you have the right business model. Once you have that business model and customer validation, which is what Thor is going to talk about next, then you can start thinking about, okay, how do I scale up my company? Maybe I do now need that permanent VP of engineering. But at the beginning, you want to have a small, agile team that is just trying to figure out, does this actually make sense? Do I have customers out there that will buy the product if I build it? Right. Talked earlier about there being a linear process to innovation. There's just no way that that happens. It's very rare that it's ever even true. And when you're an entrepreneur and you want to tell how you got to be successful, you want to sound really smart, right? So you don't talk about all those mistakes that you made along the way. So the iterative process is, rather than thinking that it's a linear process, it's acknowledging that I am going to learn things along the way, and I'm going to change the way I do business. I'm going to change my business model. So it's a cycle. It's not a linear model. It doesn't always go up and back. You can go down, up and down, etc. Customer development first. A lot of hands went up when I asked new customer development. Can somebody tell me the difference between a customer development approach and a product development approach? Anybody? Yes.
Go to the customer and find out what the customer wants, and then build it.
Very good. Very good. That's exactly right. So I work a lot with engineers. So engineers especially are really bad about this stuff. They think they have a great idea, and then they want to build it, and they want to like all this cool stuff, right? And then they want to go out and try to sell it. The problem is that the most common point of failure is not that you don't build a great product or that you don't get the engineering right. The biggest point of failure is that you don't have enough customers. That's the bottom line of failure for any type of business. So you want to make sure before you start building anything that you really understand that people need your product and that they want to buy it once you've got it built. Most of the time, I very rarely ever see an entrepreneur who's got it right the first time. It's just too hard. Even if it's something that you build for yourself, you think you understand what it is, you're just one data point. And you want to probably get out there and sell it to hundreds, thousands, and probably millions of people. And they're not all going to have the same kinds of issues that you do. So you have to get out there and make sure that you have a need out there that you're really trying to build. And then finally, rather than doing a beta test where you're kind of throwing it out there and getting feedback, what we recommend in this approach is that you build a minimum viable product. Can somebody tell me what a minimum viable product is? What's the difference between a beta and a minimum viable product? Still too early? Okay.
we'll give the minimum features to your customer.
Okay. So we want to build something with a minimum set of features that somebody will actually pay for. In a beta, you're usually not asking people to pay for it, right? So the customers are not really going to be that invested in making sure that they're going to give you real good feedback or that they're even going to continue using it later on. We recommend that you try to build something that somebody will pay for. So they're invested in it, they're going to give you honest feedback, and that you know that there's something there that really somebody is interested in enough to use some money. So we want to get towards that minimum viable product as soon as possible. Okay, so that's an overview of the lean startup approach. Any questions so far? Yes?
Why are we still in the business plan when we do response?
Okay. The reason that we still have to write business plans when we go out to raise funds is that most people don't understand this yet. The investors don't understand it yet. Not all of them, anyway. So you have to be able to present to some of these people who will demand that kind of communication tool that they understand. So that's a very good question. I think in the future, business plans are probably going to disappear. But for now, the reality is that most people have not adopted the lean startup approach of the business model canvas. So we need to be able to communicate with them in terms that they understand. Any other questions? When you think the business plan, this is another way of thinking about the business plan. The business plan is simply a summary of the business model canvas at that moment in time. So I don't think you need to write a business plan a month in advance or even a week in advance. If you have a meeting with an investor, write it right at that week. So that's a snapshot of what you have on your business model canvas, and I think that's the best way to think about the business plan. You don't want to sit there and spend months trying to write it and words, etc. To be honest, most investors that come from investors don't need to read the business plans anyway. All right, so the customer development process is that roadmap to help you figure out, well, what's the next step? What do I have to do next to be able to make something happen? There's really 4 steps in this temporary search organization I talked about that is a startup, right? There's first is the customer's discovery process. It's like, who are my customers? Who do I think is actually going to buy my product? So you have to understand what is the problem, right? And you're trying to make sure that the problem you think you're solving, that you've got a solution for that problem you think you're solving. You're going to come up with the MVP, that minimum set of features in the product that you think is going to work. And then you're going to create these, you're going to go and look out for the proposed funnels to how to get that product to your customers. That's the customer discovery process. I'm guessing that most of you all, because you're here already, are probably past this stage. At least I hope you are, because you've already done your startups and you've made it this far. So you're probably now, I'm guessing most of you in the customer validation stage, where you've got a pretty good idea that you do have some customers, but you're trying to make sure that you have something that fits. You're developing your business model, and you're trying to figure out how you're going to penetrate the market. So that's probably the stage you're in now. You see at the bottom there, I've got that little pivot though. So remember, it's not a linear process though. We are trying to get feedback along the way. And you may find something out here as you're trying to get that product market fit right that makes you say, oh, I was actually wrong in my customer discovery process. I got to go back to the drawing board and figure out what my new proposed MVP might be. Okay? So it's not a step back when you're going back at that stage, but it's a refinement of your initial idea to be something better. And in some cases, it may be a drastic change, and that's what we call a pivot. So you may decide, a pivot you might have, you thought it was this group of customers who need your problem, but you find out it's actually this group over here. That may be a pivot. Or you may find out that it's this group of people, but this isn't really the problem they care about. This is the problem they care about, and it may change your business model. That's when you're doing a pivot, and you may have to take a step back and then go through the process again. That's not a bad thing. That's a good thing, because it just saved you 5 years of your life from going down the wrong pathway, right? So this process is something that requires you to think and to be able to admit, oh, I was wrong at the beginning, but now I know better where I'm probably going, where I need to head. So that's this process. Once you get to that stage where your MVP's been validated by your customers, you can start moving into the customer creation and company building stages. And that's when you can start thinking about, well, who do I have to hire? How do I build up manufacturing processes, et cetera. Okay. One thing that's very important in this process of figuring out whether you've got customers, whether you have a product market fit, is this idea of hypothesis development. So a lean startup approach, customer development, is a scientific approach to trying to determine whether or not you've got a product market fit. So as I was alluding to earlier, the hypothesis development is a business model canvas. This is when you are trying to express what you think the world looks like in order for you to be able to sell your product. So if you are doing a software product, say, you are hypothesizing that there's a customer out there that needs your software product. Now, what are those assumptions that you're making? What are those things that need to be true in order for that person to open up their wallet and buy from you? This approach is all about trying to understand those assumptions and hypotheses you're making as you're putting together your business model. Okay. And then going out and testing those hypotheses and those assumptions by doing interviews with the people you think are going to buy your product. Does that make sense so far? And by getting that evidence, you're able to say, oh, I was actually wrong about this assumption, or I was right about this assumption or hypothesis. And that gets you closer to being sure that you're moving in the right direction, and that you have a product that people really buy. Okay? Any questions about that so far? Okay. One of the toughest things about doing these hypotheses, coming up with hypotheses, is that you come up with these hypotheses that you want to confirm. Okay? So entrepreneurs, by their nature, are optimistic, right? And they're true believers in what they're doing. So you can't have these hypotheses that are just really simple. Say something like, my customers want to reduce costs. Of course they want to reduce costs. Or, my customers want something that's cheaper, better, faster, etc. Those aren't the kind of hypotheses we're talking about. We want to get deeper into why your customers would buy something. So you have to ask why they would buy something. That's the next there. Why? So the rule of thumb is ask yourself 5 times why a customer would buy something. You may start out with, well, because they need something cheaper. Well, why do they need something cheaper? Well, because their cost of goods sold, or their material costs are so high, their margins are really small. Oh, why does that matter? Why is the margin? Well, they're in a regulated industry. Well, until you can dig down into what the real pain point is for that customer, why they would buy something. This is a build, measure, learn cycle. So it's kind of similar to what I was talking about before, is that you've got to be able to understand your feedback and to be able to go and change what you have been thinking based on the new evidence that you're getting either from your minimum viable product or from the interviews that you're doing. So you come up with an idea, you build it, get people to pay for it, get the product out there, and then measure the results from the feedback that you're getting from the product. Gather that data and then learn from it, analyze it, and that feeds back into your ideas for that next iteration. You're going to be constantly wanting to iterate. How many of you guys are doing software startups? Okay, so in an ideal world, if you're doing a software startup, this cycle might happen on a daily or even a weekly basis. You may be changing your software on the fly, and that's what you want to do, as opposed to doing these, version 1.0, version 1.2, version. That's kind of the old school way of thinking. We want to be able to change things on the fly, and we've got one of the great experts in that here today. Thor is going to be talking about how to do that. All right. Now the minimum viable product. I'm pretty sure that most of you guys, when you came up with your minimum viable product, you were thinking about something that looked kind of like this, right? This is a Swiss Army knife with everything thrown in. Right? That's what most entrepreneurs want to do, because they have this great idea. You can solve this problem, you can solve this problem, you can solve this problem. Try to build it all at the same time. And then you end up with a monstrosity that looks like this, which nobody can use. And even worse, because you're a startup and you're resource constrained, you don't have the money to even build this. So you build a really crappy version of this that breaks the first time you use it. Right? So what we want to do as startups is to think about what's really the essence, what's the minimum thing that I can build that people will actually pay for. So this is what you should be thinking about building. Something that 80, 90% of your customers will be able to use 80 or 90% of the time. Okay? And it's something very simple, something very elegant that you can build, where you can start getting feedback on the people using this, your first customers, and say, well, you know, I drink a lot of beer, so I want a bottle of beer. Can you do that? And you're getting that lot of feedback. You're eventually going to get to something that looks like this, right? Where 90% of what people need. And it's very functional, it's very useful. The business model canvas. We're going to do a workshop later on where we're going to build our business model canvases. And I think that your homework coming here is that already having business model canvases. So I'm not going to talk about it too much, but we're going to hand this out. We're going to go through each of these squares. But in general, just the business model canvas is a way to graphically represent what your business model looks like today, what your business looks like today, what you believe it looks like. The reason this is really important is that, first of all, it's just useful for yourself, right? To be able to explain, to be able to understand what the internal consistencies in your idea should be. But it's also now becoming a common language to be able to talk to anybody. I can look at anybody's business model canvas and in 10 or 15 minutes get a pretty good understanding of what your business is about, because we have this common language that we can talk about. So that's one of the reasons why I think it's really important. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing now, is to try to get the word out, because this is a really good way to communicate with people. Okay. The most important thing that we're going to try to focus on today is with that product market fit. So the two things that we're going to really focus on today and tomorrow, the value proposition and the customer segment. So who are you selling to, and why would they pay you money for it? The purpose of understanding the customer segment is to get to a customer archetype. You should intimately know who your customer is and everything about that person who's going to buy your stuff. Your customer segment is not, you know, some amorphous type of organization. You know, when I ask people who they're selling to out here, a lot of people say, "Oh, I'm selling to industrial companies." And that can't be the case, because industrial companies don't make decisions. There's somebody within that organization that's making decisions about your product, right? Or if you're selling, I'm selling to families. Well, who within the family? Is it the mother, the father, the son? Who is it? We want to be able to understand this customer architecture. This is a picture that I found on the internet about how Starbucks thinks about their customer archetypes. They apparently have, and I don't know if this is true, but this is what they've identified 11 customer archetypes. The people who go to next, do they have Starbucks here? You guys know what Starbucks is? Coffee shops everywhere, on every corner in the United States. I don't know if you can Bangladesh, but they've identified every single customer archetype, and they have a profile where they say, okay, there's the businessman, there's the college student, there's the working mom. They have an idea of what each of those people is like, and they try to build a product for them that these people will come and pay for. So that's what you need to get to your customer segments when you build your business model canvas. You should be able to draw a picture and tell me exactly who that customer is. You should actually have the picture up on the wall at your company, at your office, especially so that your engineers and the people building the product can look at that every day and say, that's the person that we're serving. In the value proposition. So this is why a customer would pay for your product or your service. And you want to think about it in terms of pains and gains, not features. So remember when we were looking at the MVP of the Swiss Army knife, right? Features would say, if we were going to describe those features, you'd say, well, I've got a blade, I've got a corkscrew, I've got a bottle opener. Those are the kinds of things that are features. But they don't get to what the pains and the gains are for somebody who's buying that knife. Why are they actually buying it? They're buying it because it has a corkscrew. Well, who cares if it has a corkscrew? Why is that? Well, because they might have a pain or a gain that you're trying to address there. So it may be that they like their wine and they have a great wine bottle opener at home, a corkscrew at home, but they need it while they can't. So they need something that's portable, that's light. They don't want to carry a bunch of different things. So you're trying to understand what the needs are of somebody who is buying a Swiss Army knife. These are just some of the different kinds of things that you need to have that will create gains or kill gains for your customer. Some common things, reducing waste, killing frustration, etc. So you guys are all going to get these presentations. I'm not going to go through all of these, but these are just some of the things that you want to be able to address when you're going out there and thinking about what it is that will get your customers to open up their wallets. This is, for those of you who maybe like graphs and charts and stuff like that, I think this is a very useful way to think about how to get that product market fit and how to get your customers to pay you for your product or service. It's called the bot behavior model. And it actually is really kind of simple. The B on that formula stands for behavior. So how do you change your customers' behavior? There's three things that you have to address, and that's also gets to the business model canvas. One is that you've got to address the motivation of your customer. You have to understand what that customer, think what makes that customer tick. So why would a customer do something? Why do the customers have their do things the way that they do? Did you want to address those? Okay. The second thing is that they have to have the ability to buy your product. So you have to understand whether or not they have the budget. They have to understand what the decision-making process is, etc. So that gets to the ability. And then the third thing there, the T stands for trigger. So we may have a customer that has the motivation and the ability to buy it, but they may never hear about your product. So how are they going to buy it? You also need that trigger. Maybe it's an advertisement. Maybe it's a salesman calling. Maybe it's that they see it on TV. We need that kind of a trigger there in order to get that customer to buy something. So these three things together are what gets you to getting a customer to buy. Any questions so far? Okay, so now I'm going to throw some case studies at you from my own experience. First, I'm going to talk about one of the companies that I invested in. So I was one of the first, was the first investor of my VC company into this company called Matrix. Very successful company now. But I will tell you, I wish to God we had this approach, the Lean Startup approach, when we invested in it now about 12 years ago. Because we would have made our money back a lot earlier. We spent about 10 years trying to figure out this Lean Startup approach on the fly, whereas we could have probably done it in less than a year and been out there selling the product much faster. So to be honest, it's one of my biggest success stories, but I have not seen a dime of it yet, because we are still waiting to exit. Let me tell you what it is. They invented a way of improving the accuracy of electrochemical sensors in a way that was completely different from the way that people had been thinking about improvements in electrochemical sensors before. So an electrochemical sensor is simply a sensor that uses electricity to try to figure out what the material is that it's trying to sense. Up to this point, all electrochemical sensors have been improved by fixing the chemistry in electrochemical sensors. What these guys, who were electrical engineers, figured out as well, actually, we can increase the accuracy by playing with the voltage to get the electronic signals and understanding it, which nobody had thought about before. So that was the technical insight they came up with. But what do you do with that? Any ideas from the audience of what you guys think you might be able to do with an improved electrochemical sensor? Any ideas? Okay. So checking how good mineral water is. Okay. What else? What might be some potential applications for an improved electrochemical sensor? Medical. Okay. For example, what? Medical physics is the answer. For diagnostics. Okay. For diagnosis, what else? So gas leaks at an industrial plant, right? Or when you're drilling. There's lots of different applications where you might think that it would be good to have an improved, more accurate electrochemical sensor. So one of the things we had to figure out, we had exactly the same problems. What market do we attack first? Because there's so many different things that we could potentially do. So we had to combine this technical insight with a market insight. And the market insight that we developed was that, we need to look at big markets. Because we want to make a lot of money. We don't want to address a small market where there's not a lot of money to be made. So unfortunately, we were able to find out, I'm saying unfortunately, because we found out that diabetes is a really big problem globally and continuing to grow even faster. There are lots of people, we're talking about tens, hundreds of millions of people who are suffering from diabetes. So what we decided to do is focus on the blood glucose market. So being able to sense, diabetic blood glucose levels and help improve the accuracy there. So our initial value proposition was accuracy. Okay, we've developed a way to make these meters way more accurate. So we spent about 2 or 3 years proving the accuracy of our meters. So you can see this is just one of the things from one of our white papers about how we were, 99.5% accurate. Whereas most of the meters out there were probably maybe 80% accurate, right? So what do you guys think? Does that sound like that's a winner? If you build it, they will come, right? So after spending 3 years of making sure that the accuracy was really important, we went out and started trying to sell it, and nobody wanted to buy it. Now, why would that be? Why do you think nobody would want to buy a more accurate sensor? Sorry? Right. What we found out was that, we don't care about accuracy. The meters out there, existing meters that are 80% accurate, are good enough for what we need to do. I just need to know whether or not I'm going to have to give myself a shot. And as long as I'm within 20% accuracy, it doesn't really matter. It does matter maybe when you're in a clinical situation in a hospital and you want to get to that kind of level. But how many meters can you sell in that case? It was just not enough market to be worth 3 years of our money to invest in to make that happen. So we're like, oh gosh, what are we going to do now? Well, at that point we started getting lots of smarter and going out and talking to the customers more. I'm simplifying it for the purpose of this, but we went out there and started talking to customers and trying to understand what their pains are and what the gains we could create for them would be. We looked at them in terms of relevance and frequency of what the pain or the gain is that we would be addressing. So what we found out is that by just not even talking about the technology, we would just go to the diabetics who were using the current meters and ask them, what do you not like about your current system of doing things? What are the problems that you have with them? And the biggest complaints we got were, test strips are really expensive. They've got to test themselves 2 or 3 times a day. We're talking about hundreds and thousands of test strips a year that they have to use. So the biggest thing we heard was that test strip costs were really high. The second thing is, it's a real pain in the butt to have to buy those all the time, so people didn't like that. They didn't like the cost of the meter. They didn't like taking lots of blood. They wanted to have smaller amounts. So we found out that these are the problems that people were having. We rank ordered them according to relevance and frequency. So something could be relevant, meaning that it's really important to your customer, but it doesn't happen that often. Maybe it only happens once a year or once a lifetime. Those things aren't really that important. So frequency is also really important. It may be a small thing, but if it happens multiple times a day, that may be something that people want to spend money to get rid of. Right? So, for example, the small sample size is something that showed up as a frequent problem. Because when you prick your finger to take blood, you're doing it very often. You know, you're doing your finger, it hurts. If you can find other places to prick yourself where it doesn't hurt as much, then it's a small thing, but it happens a lot, so you want to be able to have that as a painkiller. So by going out and trying to figure this out, what the customer really cared about, we were able to realize that, you know what? We originally thought we could make our meters more accurate, but we can also make them cheaper. We can also make them faster. We can also make them have smaller sample size, because if you're more accurate, you don't have to take as much blood, right? If you're more accurate, your manufacturing processes don't have to be as precise, and you can still get the same results. So we were able to take the original technology that was built for accuracy and pivot and adapt it to these other types of value propositions. Does that make sense to everybody? Now, this process took years and years, when I think that we probably could have done all this stuff in maybe a year. It was probably something. And fortunately, we were lucky enough that it still worked out. Now, I'm going to talk about MVP and prototype. So that's the first meter that was made. You can see it's just on a red board with a bunch of wires. Obviously, we're not going to be able to sell that. That was our first mock-up. That's actually just a piece of styrofoam with a number on it. But that's what we passed around as a prototype to see if people cared about it. You know, one big thing is that the numbers are really big. We also figured out that a lot of people with diabetes were older and they couldn't see as well, so they needed big numbers. Right? So we tested that out. But that's our first product, and that's our minimum viable product. It didn't have all the bells and whistles that we could build into it. It wasn't super accurate. It wasn't whatever. It was just really, really cheap. And we were able to sell a bunch of those as a minimum viable product. This is the product that we have today. This company now provides all of the blood glucose meters for Sanofi Aventis, which is a large medical device and pharmaceutical company in Europe. It's also the first medical device ever approved by the FDA for use with the iPhone, so it plugs into the iPhone. So getting from that point to here took a long time, and I think we could have gotten it earlier, not earlier if we did a restart approach. So that's what I'm trying to get across to you guys, is that this is the approach, kind of approach that will save you time and a lot of money. Any questions so far? I'm going to give you another case study. How much time do I have left?
Not long.
5 minutes? Okay. I can get this done in just a couple of minutes. Okay. So this is another example of a startup that I work with as a mentoring advisor that figured out a way to protect privacy when you use location-based services on your mobile phone. So like when you're trying to go from point A to point B, the idea here, the value proposition we had is that people didn't want Google to know that, or whatever services that you use here. So this is a business model canvas that we built. Well, he built at the beginning. He said all smartphone users are going to want to protect their privacy. And that it gives that enhanced privacy. What we found out by talking to the customers is that nobody cares, at least in the United States, nobody cares if Google knows where they're going. Nobody would pay for it. We found out about maybe 1% of the people we talked to were like, oh yeah, I don't want the government to know where I am. I'll pay you a lot of money for this. I think most of those people were either criminals or doing something that they didn't want their wife to find out. So we did not find that many people cared about it. So pivoted and thought, okay, maybe companies will care about it because they want to know, make sure that what their employee actually put on the other side. Maybe we will monitor people and try to figure out where they're going. And companies will want to know. We found out companies don't care about it either. So this was a case where a startup decided not to move forward because of the lean startup approach. And instead of taking 2 or 3 years to go through this process, we figured this out in 7 weeks. 7 weeks of just going out there and doing 100 different customer development interviews. We probably saved 5 years and millions of dollars of trying to launch this start. Because we had investors lined up already. We wanted to invest in this. Okay, so I'm actually not going to go over this part, which is how to get customer interviews and things like that. I think maybe Thor might talk about some of that stuff in his next talk. Can I get any questions from the audience about the startup? Yes.
This Mr. model, from the lifetime of the company, do you continuously follow it, or do you stop at some point that, like, when you get a critical mass in the market, do you stop it, or do you just work with that?
It's important, I think, to be able to do this throughout the 4 stages of your startup phase. But it starts becoming less useful as you start reducing the uncertainty. So this process is really good when there's a lot of uncertainty. There's no other ways to get the data. But as you start selling things and you start building a track record and understanding what your customers are like, the organizations, it becomes less useful, and then you can start using more traditional methods. But when you're launching a new product line or a new service, it's still very useful, of course, because then you're back into the situation of not knowing what's going to happen. Yes?
In the last 7 years, we realized that the market is very, so it's very knowledge-based frustration. It's not to overcome it or CPP-based frustration.
Oh, we almost pulled the plug a few times. We're saying, we're putting all this money into the company, and they haven't sold anything yet. So, but you know, we had faith in the team, and we kept supporting them, and I'm very happy that we did. But yeah, it's very, very tough. And it tries your patience for that long period. That's why I think the lean startup approach is really good. You can eliminate the bad ideas early on to get the good ones faster. Sure. Any other questions?
Regarding the minimum viable product, if it is a software product, we talk to clients, some people don't really understand without seeing the actual product or the testing. So we really need to develop something first. So does it make sense to develop a minimum viable product first and then go out for customer development, or how do this work actually?
So you're an engineer, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I knew it. Okay. So engineers always want to build the product first and then show it to the customers, and I totally understand that. And to some extent, you want to be able to do that, but you want first, from the beginning, talk to the customer before you show them anything, so that you can really get at what the core roots of their problems are. Because once you show them the product, then they're starting to look at it and say, oh, I like this feature, I don't like this feature. You get really kind of in the weeds without really thinking about the bigger picture. So you should start out with a bigger picture, even if you have that prototype before you show it to them. But once you do have that prototype, then absolutely yes, show it to them, but try to understand what their root problems are before you show it to them. Okay, I think my time's up. Thank you very much.
Hello. Okay, this instruction is only for the participants. Okay, कितने participant आते हैं ना आपको? Okay, इधर हमें एक group, एडिट जाओगे, एक group एडिट जाओगे. Okay, I think people are getting stoned here. That's it. Let's do a move. We have some cooking as well. আচ্ছা বাইরের কাছ থেকে কফি স্লিপ পাওয়া যাবে, you can get free coffee but not now. All right, let's sit down. আচ্ছা, let's sit down quickly. আমি একটু বাংলা কথা বলি, ঠিক আছে? Just 2 minutes. সকাল থেকে কতক্ষণ হলো? 2 ঘন্টা? লাঞ্চ ব্রেকে যাওয়ার পর তো আমরা আরো 1.5 ঘন্টা বাকি আছে। ঠিক আছে? So sometimes we will do this activity. কারো কোয়েশ্চেন আছে? যদি থাকে আমাকে বাবা আজকে করুন। And I think it's a time to feedback you know. যদি মনে করেন যে অনেক টপিক আছে, সবার কাছে আইডিয়া আছে, রাইট? এই টপিকে যদি কোনো কোয়েশ্চেন থাকে আমাদেরকে বলবেন যে এই জিনিসটা আমরা স্পিকারকে বলবো ওটা ওই টপিক নিয়ে কথা বলবো। So at least you can get something out of it. আমি 3 জনকে সিলেক্ট করবো।